I would like to now introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Nabyl Al Maskari. Mr. Al Maskari is an alumni of ACS. He attended school here from KG1 until grade 9, before there was a high school. He is now the proud father of an ACS student. Mr. Maskari is the CEO of Al Maskari Holding. AHM is the privately owned company of the Al Maskari family portfolio. AHM traces its foundation to 1968 with the establishment of the Al Maskari Group in Abu Dhabi to engage in petroleum trading and oil field services. Today he joins us to tell us about his experience as a student at ACS, the importance of education, and what he thinks the next 48 years hold for the UAE. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Maskari to the stage now.
Wow, it's been a long time since I've been in this room. I came back with my daughter very briefly, but this used to be our gymnasium, so times have certainly changed. Hello, high school students of ACS. You have a distinction that I never quite got to fulfill. But I'd like to start with something a little bit interactive. How many of you, if you could raise your hand, were here as middle school students as well as high school students? So you raise your hand. Wow, fantastic, okay. And how many of you, keep your hands up, if you were also here as an elementary school student? Amazing, okay. And how many of you, if you keep your hand up, can say that your very first day of school ever was here at ACS? Wow, big round of applause. So we have something in common, those few who kept your hands up. I too had my very first day of school in my entire life, right here, in this school, many, many years ago. And in fact, the classroom where I was brought as a preschool student, because at that time, they were allowed to have a trial of preschool before kindergarten, is still there. It's now 6D, and I went and visited. I can tell you, I have aged more than the room, so great job to the staff of ACS to refurbish it. But I think it's interesting to remember that when I was little, I have this distinct image in my mind of my father holding my hand, walking me into school for the very first time, and leaving me in the care of this community. And it was a very powerful moment for me as a child. I'm sure a very powerful moment for my father as well. And I was very proud to be able to do that same thing with my daughter Maryam last year. So Maryam is now in first grade, but I brought her to her very first day of school here at ACS when she was in kindergarten. I think it's also important to remember that the school back then is very different than the school you guys have now. For one thing, I think you guys are called sandvipers. Is that right? You're sandvipers. Okay. Who knows what you were called before you were sandvipers? Whoa! Everybody knows the Falcons. Okay, good. So, here's a bonus question. Do you know, and it may not still have been around, but do you know that the mascot, the Falcon, had a name? Okay. So I can give you a little bit of history here. Many years ago, as we do at ACS in our values, we reach out to our community and we ask the students to participate because we are creating together here. So I remember as a little boy, in my class, I was asked, like all other students of all ages in the school, to submit our recommendation for what they would call our mascot, the Falcon. It happens to be, and most people probably will not remember this, even the staff and administration who are working here today, my selection was the winning entry. And it was a big deal because I was able to bring home to my classroom a pizza party. And when you're a little kid, a pizza party is amazing. I don't eat as much pizza, but I imagine you're still happy with that. So the mascot's name was Thunder. Thunder, yeah. It's not particularly original, I will admit, but it was the winning entry. And very, very funnily, it was actually a name that I had for my bike at the time. So I sort of, I would run around Abu Dhabi, and back in those old days, this was the kind of community where you basically were able to bike everywhere. Bike to school, you went home. And so it was very important with my bike that I named it because it was probably my most precious possession. And I thought, if I can name my bike Thunder, I should name the mascot as well. So you can imagine, when you have all these memories of this place, it's not just about the perspective that you have, it's oftentimes the memories that you share with others, and in particular, not just among the students, but also within the faculty. So there's probably some things that have carried forward in time. For example, if I said to you, are any of you eligible for or will you win this Stanton Award? Do you know the Stanton Award? No? Okay. So this is an athletic award that I understood for some period of time was part of this community. And actually it's named after our athletic director who used to be in charge of all the PE activities that we're taking. Now, for you it might look like a name in a yearbook, but for me it's this iconic larger-than-life person who stayed with us for all these years. And actually, in this very space, in this auditorium, he would chase us around and teach us how to do all of the fun things that you did. Including, by the way, at very inside, he always called us a single euphemism, a little nickname. And he called everyone the same nickname, and it was Bird Dog. And you would say, like, why would you call somebody a bird dog? Well, he would give you the order, and you would go running around the room, and that was his way of sort of connecting with us on a personal level. And it was a nickname in which he showed how much he cared about us and cherished us. I'm going to tell you one other story about a very important teacher that was here, who's no longer with us, and his name is Mr. Kovac. And Mr. Kovac was my science teacher. When I was little, we didn't have a lot of activities, we didn't have as much TV as you guys did now, and we certainly didn't have as many distractions with iPads and iPhones. But Mr. Kovac, as a science teacher, taught us the love of astronomy. And actually, he would take us to the desert, and with his telescopes, we would get to look at the stars. And very important to know about Mr. Kovac, all these years later, is that he was eligible as a finalist for something called the Teacher in Space, which is an amazing program that NASA wanted to put together that had these teachers from around the world enter to become someone that could get into a space shuttle and go into space. And you heard earlier about how important this has been for the UAE when we took this pride to have our first UAE astronaut go forward. But actually, many, many years ago, Mr. Kovac was eligible to do it. And for those who know history, we're actually very fortunate that he wasn't selected because he would have been on the Space Shuttle Challenger. And I think if you know what that is, you can imagine how powerful a moment it was for all of us that we still had Mr. Kovac with us, right? One other thing, if you can imagine, all these years later, more than 3 decades later, you can remember these people. I was a student who really cared about being perfect. I think my daughter is very similar, unfortunately. It's okay not to be perfect. But for me, when I was a kid, 100% was essentially my only objective. And if I got less than 100%, I thought to myself, well, it's not up to my standards. And I remember one time I had a test, and Mr. Kovac had issued it, and I was reaching that point in the multiple choice, and I said, well, I'm pretty sure it's one of 2 things. It's either A or it's D. It was the only question that I knew that was maybe going to be wrong. And it was very important for me to be right. So I was a young kid, and I decided I would apply a little bit of game theory, right? And I thought, well, I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm going to take the chance to put in a letter that is an A with a little bit of a tail on top, because we didn't fill in circles, right? And so I said, I'm going to make this little A almost look like a D, and Mr. Kovac knows me so well, I'm a great student, he's probably going to think I meant the right answer, A or D. So sure enough, and this, by the way, I'm a little kid, right? Not in high school. This was, at that time, the way that you thought about sort of really getting one over your teacher. Not a particularly effective strategy, by the way. So when I got to pass the test back, it said 99 out of 100. And I went to Mr. Kovac, and of course, I knew now it was correctly D. And I had this moment where I handed in the paper, and I was going to make the argument that that was, in fact, a D. And Mr. Kovac looked at me. It must have been an eternity of silence. And he simply said, if you tell me that it was meant to be a D, I will give you the point. And if you don't, you can go back to your desk. And it was that early moment that I realized it's not so important to always be right, but it's always important to do right. And so I took the 99 and I went and I sat back down. Those are the kind of lessons that despite many, many years, you still apply in everything you do when you go through life. It's the relationships you have to one another. It's the way that you respect yourself by respecting the rules that we apply, and that's fairness and honesty. And remember, it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to stumble a bit. I'm going to take a little aside which talks about the fact that if you today, across you, were to ask one more question, which is, how would you define Abu Dhabi? And you can give me many answers that are correct, but I would assume you can give me some. If you said one word, what is Abu Dhabi? Give me an answer, someone.
Diversity.
Diversity, wow, okay, good, yeah. So people would start with, it's probably a city. Could be an emirate. Some people might incorrectly say it's a country. It's sort of a country, it's not right? Successful. So the word I would use, and I'm going to give you a bit of a hint, is actually in the title of this school. It's a community. That's the problem with high school kids, you know, they're gonna give us one. So Abu Dhabi is a community. Now why do I say Abu Dhabi is a community? If you define the place that we live in by the relationships we have, if you define yourself by the company we keep and those we care about, there's no better definition to me than Abu Dhabi as a community. And the fact that you, as students within the American Community School, you espouse all of those ideals every single day. And on National Day, you are the absolute reflection of what we aspire to achieve. You are diversity, and that was correct, both by gender, by belief, by faith, by background, ethnicity, but collectively, you form a very strong and integrated community. And when you think about the fact that we define ourselves very much from where we live, I would say, although you probably would get a little bit in trouble to call yourself Emiratis, right? You certainly could call yourselves Dhabiani, right? That's a way to define yourself as saying, I belong to and I come from. A demonym. It's a big word, you can look it up later, but it literally means, what is the place from which I am? And that, you all, today, are Dhabiani. This is your home. Now when I was growing up, and you saw that early picture, they made the comment, you know, Nabyl, he didn't graduate from here. I grew up in a time in which the best thing that my family could do for me, not having a high school, was to be sent away to boarding school. Yeah? So the best education, the best decisions my family could make were to send me away. But I can tell you as a father who's now enrolled my daughter here, and inshallah my future daughters here, I no longer have to make that very difficult decision as a parent. You are privileged to be part of a very important and vibrant community that has some excellence both in academia, but also importantly in that community. And if you graduate, which inshallah you all will, especially those who started their first day ever here, I hope you stay the full journey, you have the opportunity to remain in a place like Abu Dhabi and pursue some of the most prestigious higher education in the world. The best university system you will find here. It doesn't mean you have to stay here. But I will say that the fact that you can pursue your careers, your education from here, that is a proud moment, and it's a testament to the leadership of this country. It's a testament to all the people who have made this what it is today. And in particular, to all of the teachers and all of the staff over all these years, because they created the academic excellence, which means that the best education in the world can be found literally within your own Dhabiani city. You should be proud of that. You should be part of it. And of course, we're happy for you to go around the world and attend any university like you want to. But the fact that you have the choices here, I think that's really something we should honor on National Day. They asked me to speak for about 10 to 15 minutes and then answer questions from you, but I can answer a fair amount. I can tell you where everything was, I guess, about 30 years ago. I can tell you what the journey is like coming out of a place like a high school where you have to make decisions. Most importantly, I can tell you that you will probably remember many more things about your time here than you will realize today. The fact that I can vividly recall some of my teachers, the fact that I can tell you exactly what happened within each square meter of this space, that is a reflection of the fact of how important and how formative it is at this moment in our lives. And you don't have to soak it all in. You don't have to walk away and say, let me put in my diary everything that happened. I assure you, it will be there, and you will recall it, and you will recall one another when you need to, and in moments when you share that pride. So with that, I will pause, and I will open it up for some questions. My daughter wants to come on stage. I'm going to bring her up for 1 second. Yalla Mariam, come. No? You want to come? Okay, she's going to sit. She's giving me a fussy face. Let me tell you, by the way, and I think this is what's really fun. You're not at this stage yet. But for many faculty here, their children are also in this school. Right? Yvette was talking about the pride she felt with her daughter here in the road playing. This is a unique experience for us as parents as well. So thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for letting me share this with my daughter. And don't feel, oh, I have a hand. I was trying to give you time. Okay, go ahead, I'm ready.
So when your daughter's born, do you know that you want to send her to the ACS?
My wife and I had a discussion. I don't pretend to make decisions unilaterally, and I certainly would say that the fact that the program is so strong made it very easy for us to agree that ACS was the right place for her to go. That being said, if she hadn't gone to ACS, I probably would be very upset. The only other school I can think of at that time, and I recall from years ago, my experience here, and I think it's still around, is there Shweifat still around? By the way, we felt as strongly. I never went to Shweifat, but if you said the name, we're like, fighting words. So I think it would be very difficult to send my daughter to Shweifat, no doubt about it. That's a lot of years. My sister was a Shweifat kid, yeah. No, not again. Not again, okay. I got some questions in the back.
Yeah, hurry up.
By the way, she was telling me earlier that she was on this stage and you were performing, and she was singing one of the songs, which is great. So she's already been up here once. She's clearly my child, right? Okay. Question?
What do you wish people knew about the UAE that they don't already know?
It's a really good question. So oftentimes I travel around the world. I'm very fortunate to do that. And I sometimes get asked a lot about the culture of our country. And I think that the expectation is that there is a difference between being an expat and being a local. This is the most common thing, the assumption of this sort of duality of both class and status. And I try to explain to people that fundamentally, to kind of separate the two doesn't understand the fabric of this country. We would not exist if we didn't have a multinational, multicultural community. And most importantly, we would not succeed if we tried independently to strive towards that. And I try to explain very simply. There are not many places in the world you can go to where you can have so many cultures, so many nationalities, so many languages that are respected. We talked a little bit about the expo, and I think it was a fantastic presentation earlier. Let me give you one other example. Saadiyat, that island, obviously developed very recently. In my youth, that was an island that no one would visit. It's become a cultural epicenter, not only for the region, but for the world. We have a first-class museum here. The Louvre is fantastic. You can literally go and witness other cultures and arts and all of the way that they create. But beyond that, you will see, it's been announced, in the coming years, there will be a very special place set aside on Saadiyat Island, which will be for the houses of Abraham, the Abrahamic faith. And that is going to be one location where you will have a synagogue, a church, and a masjid all together on one site. That is an amazing reflection of tolerance. Definitionally, this idea of our leadership trying to communicate the value of interfaith and the respect. That, to me, is the year of tolerance, the announcement of it. And when I share that story with people from around the world, they are surprised. They would never believe that this would occur in almost any progressive society, let alone in a place like the Middle East. So take pride in the fact that you are part of that story. You are all the reason why everyone around the world has come to focus on our country as a beacon of tolerance. And I hope many of you, many years from now, you will always remember this place as your home. Because when I grew up here, many of my student friends, they were sponsored by their parents' jobs. And when those jobs were gone, they would sometimes leave. And this was their home. I will tell you the definition of this for you guys, having some of you grown your entire lives here, to be honest, it's as much your home as it is mine and any of my countrymen. Because you have literally spent your years here. And probably for many of you, you spent more of your years in this ACS than I have. I was sent to boarding school. In total, I actually did the math. Thank you, Yvette, for doing this. It was 8 years total in the school. Right? You guys have been here basically for your entire lives, which is amazing. I know we're running short on time. Yeah? No, we're not. No. One more question.
In what ways do you think that ACS reflects this year's UAE's goal of tolerance?
So, ACS in particular, yeah? So I'm going to actually give a little toss-up here. Marian, what are the 4 core values of ACS? I know there's courage, curiosity, integrity, and
compassion.
All of those represent tolerance. No word independently has any more weight than the other. But remember that for each of those words, it's a personal journey and it's a personal resonance within you. Integrity to me can be shared as common values to integrity to you. Compassion can also be the same, but courage is individual. Right? You have to find it within yourself to define what in life is courage. Facing adversity in whatever way that you do. It could be, social, friendships. All of these elements you should both have shared, but you should personalize so that you know what it means to have these ideals in your life and what it means to really defend them when you take them from here. Because you cannot take your books, you can maybe take your uniforms, but you will always take the ideals. Great job, Nayan. Okay, guys, thanks for the time.
Please give Nabyl Al Maskari another round of applause.